Welcome to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal, your trusted source for personal injury claims in Western Australia. Each week, we simplify complex legal issues, from motor vehicle accidents to workplace injuries, so you can confidently navigate your rights and secure the compensation you deserve.
All right, imagine this. You're a barista in Perth, right in the middle of the morning rush. You're making a flat white, steaming some milk, when suddenly, bam, the steam wand malfunctions, spraying hot milk everywhere. Now, you're not just dealing with a scalded hand, but potentially a workers' comp claim. And that's what we're diving into today, the Workers' Compensation and Injury Management Act of 2023, here in Western Australia. Whether you're pouring lattes, coding in an office, or anything in between, this act lays the groundwork for what happens if you get hurt on the job.
It's that safety net we all hope we never need. But it's there to protect workers and give employers a clear roadmap.
Exactly. And one of the first things that might surprise you is just how broadly this act defines a worker. You might think, oh, it's only for full-time employees. But you'd be wrong. Even if you're a working director, a jockey hired by a trainer, or, get this, even working from your kitchen table, under your employer's instructions, you're considered a worker. It's like they were trying to predict the future of work.
And they really try to account for the many ways work has changed. But that does bring up some interesting questions, especially in today's gig economy. Like, what about that food delivery driver we mentioned earlier? Are they considered a worker under this act?
It's a bit of a gray area, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of things that aren't always so black and white, the Act's definition of injury goes way beyond the typical slip and fall.
Absolutely. They've really expanded the scope to include things you might not expect. We're talking about diseases contracted due to work, even pre-existing conditions made worse by your job.
So if our barista develops carpal tunnel syndrome from all that milk steaming, that could be covered.
Exactly. Or let's say you're a construction worker with a pre-existing back condition. If that condition is aggravated by the demands of your job, that could fall under the act as well.
Wow, that's a game changer for a lot of people, I'd imagine. And what really caught my eye was the inclusion of mental health. Apparently, stress from a toxic workplace could potentially count as a work-related injury.
It's a huge step forward in recognizing the impact of the workplace on our mental well-being. It acknowledges that sometimes the most damaging injuries aren't always visible.
Okay, so let's say, unfortunately, you do experience an injury at work. What happens next? I'm guessing the claims process can be a bit of a maze.
It can be, but the Act tries to make it as straightforward as possible. You need to file a claim, of course, and this is where that deemed liability acceptance day comes in. It's basically a deadline for the insurer to respond to your claim.
And if they miss that deadline?
Then your claim is deemed accepted, and you can move forward with getting the compensation you need. It's designed to prevent people from being left in limbo for months on end, waiting for an answer.
That's reassuring. But what about situations with multiple employers, like our delivery driver who works for several different apps? Who's ultimately responsible if they get injured?
You've hit on one of the trickier aspects of the Act. It can get really complicated, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer. The Act tries to provide some guidance, but often it comes down to the specific details of the employment arrangement.
So let's say the claim goes through, smoothly. What kind of compensation are we talking about here? It's not just about covering those lost wages.
Right, not at all. The Act takes this broader approach. It aims to help injured workers, get back on their feet financially, medically, and even, in terms of their overall quality of life.
Okay, so walk us through it. What are some of the specifics?
Well, first and foremost, there's income compensation, right, to cover lost wages. But beyond that, you have coverage for medical expenses, which is pretty comprehensive. We're talking doctor's visits, hospital stays, even specialist treatments.
So if our barista needs physiotherapy for their scalded hand, that's covered.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And it goes even further. The Act covers the cost of rehabilitation, too, helping you regain any lost function and get back to your normal life as much as possible.
It's interesting you mentioned normal life because it's not always just about getting back to work, is it?
You're right. And the Act recognizes that. That's why you can even claim for things like modifications to your home if you need them because of your injury.
Okay.
Need a wheelchair ramp or a special bath. That's covered.
Wow. I had no idea. They really have thought of everything.
And here's another one that might surprise you. You can even claim for replacement clothes if yours were damaged in a workplace accident.
Wow.
Imagine a painter, for example, who gets splashed with paint that ruins their clothes. Those costs are covered.
That makes so much sense when you put it like that. It's about getting you back to a place where you can function as normally as possible, you know, whatever that looks like for you.
Exactly. Now, in some cases, injuries can have long-term effects, even if you are able to return to work. That's where the concept of permanent impairment comes into play.
Right. So even if you're not completely out of work, you might still be dealing with the consequences of that injury.
Precisely. And the Act has a system for compensating you for that. They actually have a table that lists various impairments and assigns a percentage of compensation based on the severity.
The cable. So it's like lost a finger, 10%, sprained ankle, 5%.
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that, but you get the idea. It's an attempt to standardize the process and make it fairer. For example, they have different entries for various levels of arm impairment, depending on the specific limitations caused by the injury.
That makes sense. But I imagine there's still a lot of gray areas when it comes to assessing the actual impact of an injury on someone's life, right?
Of course, the table is a starting point, a tool to help guide the process. But there's always room for individual circumstances to be considered.
So what happens if there's a disagreement? Let's say you don't agree with the insurer's assessment of your permanent impairment or the compensation offered. Do you have any recourse?
Absolutely. The Act outlines a very clear dispute resolution process, and it's designed to be accessible and fair.
Accessible, meaning you don't necessarily need to hire a high-powered lawyer and go to court.
Exactly. The first step is usually conciliation. This involves bringing the parties together with a neutral third party to try and reach a mutually agreeable solution.
So it's more about finding common ground than battling it out in a courtroom.
Exactly. And in many cases, conciliation is successful. But if an agreement can't be reached, the next step is arbitration.
Arbitration. That sounds a bit more formal.
It is in the sense that it involves a more structured process and results in a binding decision, but it's still generally quicker and more cost-effective than going to court, which is what the Act aims for.
It's reassuring to know, right, that there are systems in place to kind of handle those disagreements, fairly. But this whole discussion, I feel like it really highlights how this Act isn't just about like individual workers and employers, right? It's about like the bigger picture, how we as a society, take care of people who get injured on the job.
Absolutely. Yeah, a robust workers' compensation system benefits everyone, not just the people directly involved in a claim.
Totally. It's like if someone gets hurt, right, and they can't work, it impacts their family, their community, even the broader economy.
Exactly. A good system acts like a safety net, preventing those ripple effects from becoming even more significant issues. It helps ensure that injured workers aren't left to shoulder the burden alone, and that's good for everyone in the long run.
So it's not just about being compassionate, right? It's about creating a more stable and equitable society overall.
Precisely. And it's fascinating how this Act reflects our evolving understanding of work and well-being. From gig workers to mental health, it grapples with some pretty complex issues.
Which leads, I guess, to a question I've been pondering. Is it striking the right balance? The world of work is changing so rapidly with like new industries, new technologies, new ways of working, like emerging all the time. Can the Act keep up?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that we as a society need to keep asking. The Act tries to balance worker protection with employer responsibility, but finding that sweet spot is an ongoing challenge.
Yeah. It really makes you think about the future, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What will work look like in like 10, 20 years? And how will the Act need to adapt to ensure that workers are, still protected?
It's a conversation that needs to happen, and hopefully by, shedding light on these issues, we can contribute to that conversation in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. Well, here we are at the end of our deep dive into workers' comp in Western Australia. It's been quite a journey, and we've covered a lot of ground. Hopefully, you feel more informed, maybe even empowered to navigate this complex world.
And remember, this is just a starting point, right? If you're looking for more information, the full Act is available online. But for now, we'll leave you with this thought. As the world of work continues to evolve, how do we ensure that workers' compensation remains relevant, effective, and fair for everyone? Something to ponder the next time you're sipping your latte or coding away. Until next time, stay curious.
Thanks for tuning in to Personal Injury Claims, explained by Foyle Legal. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes and isn't legal advice. For advice specific to your situation, visit us at Foyle Legal. And don't forget to subscribe or leave a review.